All right, hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Fiction and Feelings. Today, I'm going to be telling you why a great big beautiful life, or BBL, a great BBL, as I saw a girl on TikTok call it, is 5 stars. I'm telling you why it's 5 stars because it is 5 stars. So I already know that today is going to be rambly. Got my notes and thing because I got like 4 and a little bit pages of notes, guys, because prepared. I can't prepare for this because I was about to ramble. I said I know what I want to say. There are so many things about this book that make it 5 stars, and everyone on TikTok is literally giving it a bad rap, and I'm like, y'all are incorrect, incorrect. Y'all are wrong. You are wrong for so many reasons. So today we're gonna dive deep, at least 50% of the book we dive in deep into, because I don't feel like the latter half needs to be dived into as deeply. I could actually do a whole separate video diving deep into that, and by the end of the video y'all can let me know if you want that. But I think my coverage of this book is good enough for this book. I still want you guys to read the books, even though I have spoilers and things. I think that the whole vibe and energy of reading the book is in reading the book and experiencing it for yourself. Because I give summaries and I give tidbits about the things, but I miss out stuff. We all miss out stuff unless I'm going page by page, which I did with, I think, The Way I Used to Be, and that book was just boring to me, and that's why I went page by page. But this book was just full of the juice. It had me so good. It had me in a chokehold, actually. I started to try to read this book before I listened to One Golden Summer. I just wasn't in a mood to read. So then I was confused about the first page. And then I was just like, maybe this book is not going to be that great. But then after I listened to One Golden Summer, I was like, I'm finally ready to get into this. Let's get into this. And then I was hooked. I was hooked. It had me in a chokehold. I was ready for this book. So if you see me looking down, it is because I don't want to forget anything. I want to give y'all all that's in this noggin about this book. So let's start with the first phrase that's in this book. There's an old saying about stories and how there's always 3 versions of them: yours, mine, and the truth. Oh, okay, Spice. All right, Emily Henry. Okay. You said I'm not about to start this book off without quoting. I'm not about to have y'all not be hooked already. I don't know. So we have Alice Scott, who's a writer at The Scratch. This paper, I assume is a paper or a magazine. I don't know. It isn't actually specified, in my opinion. I don't think it matters. But she's an aspiring biographer, which is why we get into Margaret Grace Ives. I wish we had a picture of Margaret Grace Ives because this woman is so many things and she brings up so many emotions. This whole Ives media story brings up so many emotions that it's just I wish that there were characters so that when you do the family tree, you can just see this person, this person. But I don't think that there are pictures. There should be a film about this. Honestly, there should not. They should make this into a movie. No, because this feels like a movie. This feels like if it is the screenplay for a movie. If we should get a movie to understand this book. And that's why I love it so much. It doesn't just feel like a book. It feels like it's so much bigger than just the words on a piece of paper. Margaret Grace Ives. I think her, no, it's Irene. Her disguised name is Irene or Iris, something like that. Whatever. I never call her that. I don't pay attention to that. But she's a tabloid princess, the heir to the Ives media empire, which is a constant tension for paparazzi, gossip columnists, just because like being rich and the heiress is the reason why she's popular. Her father didn't have any sons, so she was the heiress because her father didn't have any sons. And they're just wealthy. And you want to know, why were they in the tabloids so much? What was all of the tea? What happened with them? Why was there a cult? Why was there an accident? Why was there betrayal? Why was there's so much juice that even nosy people like me, Loki, are like, pardon? Pardon me? I want to know what's going on. I want to know why this story is so juicy. What is actually happening? So, even though Alice is getting to the truth, let's backtrack a little bit. Even though Alice is saying that she wants to get the truth from Margaret, I feel like she's so biased because we get this backstory of Alice and her dad. How her dad loved to play Cosmo St. Clair, whom is Margaret's husband. And he used to play Cosmo St. Clair while him and his wife would be dancing around the house. And Alice fell in love with this, and she loved Cosmo. She loved the Ives. She loved the lore of it all. And her dad bought this book called, it was an unauthorized biography of the fall of the Ives media. I think that's what it's called. The fall of the Ives media. And Alice loved looking at the pictures because she thought that Margaret was so glamorous and she loved to see all of it. But then as she got older and she could read, she read it and realized that it was pretty much just exposés and headlines and just written trash talk about the Ives, and she hated the book after. So she really wanted the truth. She wanted to figure out what the story of Margaret's family really was. But because of the fact that she was like so intertwined with it all, I feel like you couldn't say that she's really coming for the truth. I felt like it was more like she's coming to make Margaret look good. As a journalist, yeah, she's looking for the truth and she's looking for all the dirt and stuff. But like even in page 7, because I wrote it down, Margaret says, I bet you're the kind of person that tries to find beauty in everything. And with Alice's bubbly personality, it feels like if that's what it is. Like she's trying to find the good in Margaret's story. She's not actually coming for the tea. She's not coming for the gossip, which is a good thing because it's not like if she's coming to, you know, just for cash grab for Margaret's story. It's more of a like curiosity that she actually wants to know. And you like that about it, but also it's like, are you actually going to tell the honest truth about it if you're already so skewered into like liking Margaret? But then again, she doesn't know Margaret, so maybe she will hate Margaret by the end of it. So there's that. And then she wants to know like what it's like to be born in a world with silver spoons and golden platters of actors drunkenly swimming fully clothed through the indoor pool and politicians making handshake agreements across antique dinner tables, how it felt to fall in love with a rock and roll royalty and for him to love you back wildly, and other things like the scandal, the cult, the accident, like I mentioned a few seconds ago. And in looking at it, you're like, okay, maybe she has good intentions, but also she's not really. Well, even Margaret herself says about the quote on his screen of, have you ever met like a celebrity? Alice is like, oh, she interviews celebrities all the time, and Margaret is like, no, 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 those are people who came into money. Have you ever actually met like people who just had money? Because during the book, like even her father, Margaret's father, is just so wealthy that they gamble like chores of some sort, like cleaning out horse pens and all sorts of things just for humiliation and not actually money, because they have so much money that they don't care about money. And you can tell that that's an unrelatable thing to Alice. So she also is curious about that and wants to share that part of it, the reality of what it's like growing up like that. And I think, if I recall, Margaret had mentioned how it's hard for her to really relate it to anybody else, because relate it back to people, because she didn't grow up without, like, so she said Cosmo, her husband, became famous and he would always want to go back to living that life, while for her she always knew money, so she didn't understand the difference between not having money and then coming into money, and that feeling, that want, that need that her grandfather, her great grandfather would have had, which we're going to get into that story in a minute. But then we have Hayden, who is the male, the person that we're supposed to fall in love with, and he's a music journalist, a Pulitzer Prize winning biographer. So he's already a biographer. He's written a biography about Len Sterling and his diagnosis with dementia. So writing about Margaret would be like perfect. So it's like, why are you making him audition for a whole month if he's already technically done this? And he has won a praise for doing it, which means that he's really good at doing it. When Alice is now aspiring and she's never written anything about biographies. But that's how we get into the story. So they have to audition. So Alice has to create her story. Hayden has to create their stories. They have NDAs and they can't talk to each other about it. They can't talk to anybody else about it. And after the end of the month, they will pitch the story back to Margaret. And it's like, okay, all right, cool. They both agree to it. Alice says she'll take Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Hayden will take Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and they'll have Sundays off. So Alice is given the opportunity, and it's like, this is a bit suspicious that she's given this opportunity, because, like I just said, she's never actually written this stuff. So why are we letting her do this? I'm all for like the equality and the feminism and all of that, but we can all agree this is suspicious, because this is a hands down that you would obviously give it to Hayden, because even if Alice is like the greatest writer ever, like he has the qualifications and she kind of doesn't. So then you get their interactions of her just being sunshine and he's all grumpy and he has his guard up and he's just like, oh, you can't stick me out, and he's feeling all insecure about himself, because later we just find out, as we find out more about him and him letting his guard down, we realize that he feels like if he's not good enough, like if he's constantly proving himself in his own mind and with his family, so it feels as though, oh, well, if this woman is giving this girl this chance, maybe I'm not good enough. It doesn't matter that I have a Pulitzer Prize. I still have to audition for this, which is low-key good, because he's humble enough to not be like, nah, this should be mine. We love that. We'll hate him. Love that for you, King. Then let's get into the Ives media. The family of the Ives. We start with Lawrence, who is the great grandfather of Margaret. He's born the eighth in 10 children. We talk about how his parents were two destitute farmers in Pennsylvania. His younger brother dies of frostbite in the woods one winter, and he wants better for himself and his younger sister, because he doesn't want to feel as though, because he already feels like if they're the forgotten ones, like the last children, like his parents have way too much children to take care of, not enough money, not enough anything, so they always have to be like grinding, and he doesn't want his sister to be forgotten. So he decides, okay, I'm gonna go out and I'm going to try to mine for some gold. So he and his colleague Thomas Doherty decide that they're gonna go, and after 8 years of not finding anything, then he starts to get this hunch that he can find this gold in this one place. And he sends Thomas off and he's like, oh, I'm just gonna retire, which is lying. And then he is just like, all right, cool. He leaves him, and Lawrence strikes silver. So then he buys a hotel, which this is where Margaret starts to do her little sneaky lies, because throughout the book she has like these little slip ups where you're like, girl, you're bringing attention to the fact that you did like if he was a little bit more on it, we could have realized that you were lying and you needed to stop lying. You know, like you should have got your story straight before you even start any of this. Had a little couple of slip ups, but that's for the purpose of the audience so that we can catch the plot twist or see where the plot twist started from the beginning. Got it. But honestly, girl, do better. So Alice goes through these lengths to do like to find out the fact checking and stuff of all the information that she's saying. So we find out, yeah, Lawrence got this money. He had this big fight with Thomas. He bought a hotel. He named it the Aldridge. No, the Arledge. I'm gonna butcher that. I don't know what it's called. Remember, I didn't listen to this, guys, so I have no idea what it's actually called. I just read it and I was like, in my head, it's gonna be whatever it's gonna be. And at this point, I think this is where somebody hate comes from the TikTokers, where they're like, but why is all of this information relevant? Why are we starting from the great grandfather? Why do we need to know all this information? But I don't think people understand, like, it's a bigger picture thing, which I will talk about at the end, but also even looking at it as less of a bigger picture. Margaret thinks that her family is the curse. Like everything that her family touches just falls apart, is cursed, is awful, is just bad. So she is like haunted by the history of all this. I remember that she's gone into hiding for decades. So she's literally like been haunted by this. My family is the curse. All we can do is bring destruction. And as we unfold the story more and we realize things that have happened, we go, oh, I can see where you could get that from. So this is why she has to start by showing you the lead up, the how it got to her, why it is the way it is, why all of this is happening. And you can't just jump in the middle of the story. Like Lawrence is the first person that caused their family to have the riches. He's the one that started it all. He like even when we get introduced to Gerald, which is Lawrence's first son, I think only son because he has a daughter. Then you hear him say that, you heard Margaret say that Gerald was the domino, I think, the first tipping block of like the downfall of the Ives. Like just him being born, his being into the paper, because his father opened three newspapers. He bought the San Francisco Daily Dispatch, and that was the start of everything. And then he had like three papers in total, but his son Gerald was responsible for how it's run, like present day, and then up to whenever it stops being Ives Media. And Gerald constantly felt like a disappointment to his father. His sister was like pretty much silver spoon. She could do whatever she felt like doing. And Gerald felt like if he always had to prove himself, so he would just take big risks and try to go big or go home, because it didn't really matter. They just had the money to deal with it all. He decides that he's going to make the papers as big as he possibly can. They're successful because he's literally running them like, I think his quote is truth is king. So everything is fact checked, everything is all over the papers. Like they're monopolizing this thing. He's buying out papers, he's buying competitors, employees, and really truly just like doing as hard as he can with those big risks. So then he wants to move to New York because San Francisco and California aren't big enough. So he wants New York. So he goes to New York, and He takes over that media, and then I think he wants to be a part of politics, but he's not really getting into that because people don't really trust him. And then he sees a senator and he's like, oh, I'll go after his daughter. So he starts to pretty much bribe the senator, but more like just showering him with gifts. And then an arranged marriage happens, and he allows Rosalind, his wife, to just do whatever she feels like doing. She's a philanthropist. And then he opens, then his dad falls ill, and he's there rambling about the fights with Thomas, rambling about his brother dying, and I think rambling about his sister, because his sister didn't want to forgive him because she married somebody in Thomas's family and didn't ever want to forgive him. So all of that build up, all of that showing how at the end of it all, Lawrence was still like stricken with all this grief at the end, the pressures that Gerald was facing. And Gerald was filled with so much anger because his father didn't love him, essentially. His father didn't give two craps about him. And after his father dies, he moves to Hollywood and he decides, you know what? I can just do drugs, sex, and money. That's all I'm doing. I don't care about anything. And then he has this mistress named Nina, and he opens Royal Pictures and he gets into film. He's living his best life, just sleeping with her, drug, sex, money, music, all day, every day, party. And then Rosalind sends him a message being like, your mom, she passed away, buddy. You weren't here, but she passed away. He gets even more angry at the world, and he continues to go down the path that he's going down. And then Nina gets sick and she leaves, which, if you know, you know, you know. I'll spoil that later. But Nina gets sick, and Gerald and Nina break up, and he reconnects with his sister and flies Rosalind and the children and his sister and his niece into the house in Hollywood. And he has his son Frederick, his daughter Francine, his niece Ruth, and his sister Gigi and Rosalind all under the same roof, and they're now the big Ives family in Hollywood. And this is where it pretty much starts of them being like in tabloids and all, like they were a part of tabloids before, but this is where everyone was pretty much like just like, oh my goodness, the scandals, it's crazy, Ives media, all the things. So then we we get more into how Gerald had pretty much just let Frederick run amok. He was doing whatever he felt like doing. All the children were. And then when they came to Hollywood, they didn't want to, but they had no choice because that was their father's money. So they all came begrudgingly because I think they were in, where were they? San Francisco, right? Something like that. And then Frederick is pretty much just like, you know what? I'm not going to do anything. I don't care about doing anything. And Gerald was like, no, you're going to do something. I'm going to give you this film, this little running film thing. And Francine, you have to marry somebody. And she was like, no, I'm going to take over this. I'm going to take over this woman's magazine, and I'm going to make it successful so that I don't have to marry somebody. Okay, Francine, love that for you. We love that for you, Queen. So Frederick is pretty much just being a bum, just squandering all the job opportunities that he can, but in this high position because his father gave him this high position. And then his future wife storms in and is like, why do I have to deal with this low life when I've given, she's a director, I've given Gerald so much, whatever, whatever. And I loved that scene actually. I found it like hilarious that he was finally gonna run for his money, and you love that dynamic that they're having. And He pursues her because he finally feels something. The Frederick, Margaret's dad, when he feels something when the mom is back at him. And their little mini story is kind of sad to me. The fact that he wanted her so much, and then he wanted the children so much, and he loved all of that. And then when she finally just wanted to be the girl boss that she was, when Bernie wanted to be the girl boss that she just wanted to be, he was just like, but why do we have to be at home while you just be a director and you don't care about your family anymore? But they were like best friends, and it was just like, we could have made that work, Emily. Emily, why didn't we make that work? But then she gets remarried, and um, I think Margaret and Laura, the two daughters of Frederick, are pretty much, they like their stepfather Roy, but they love the dynamic between their mom and their dad, which is so cute. Love that for them. And we'll stick a pin in the Ives family. I feel like we should have gone on more of Hayden, but like I also know why we didn't. After we get to the plot twist, I understand why we didn't get any more of Hayden, because there wasn't really any more of him to get. And later on, I liked the fact that we didn't get any more of Hayden. But while I was reading it, I was like, I wish I knew more about him, because all of this is in Alice's perspective or Margaret's perspective. And we're getting the stories, and Hayden just feels like a little pawn that we're just going boop, 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 boop. Move when I say to move. But we know that he has a brother. We know that he feels like he's a black sheep of the family. We know that his brother is like a pediatrician, and that he was the captain of his football team, and all sorts of mundane information. And that his mom lives in Indiana. His dad is the mayor in the small town of Indiana. It's all just like irrelevant information that we're just like, okay, we kind of just gave him a little any mini story. And I wish that we would have given him more. He deserves so much better story wise. But it's pretty boring in comparison to like Margaret's life. But I like I said, after reading it, I do like that they didn't make Alice and Hayden super complex. Because the story was already complicated and complex, I like the fact that they were like, you know what? Maybe we needed to backtrack a little bit and not make it as complex as it was. I think that it stops us from going, oh, but we have so many more answers that need to be left. Maybe there might be a but two. We never know. But also, when you get to the end of the book, it's like it feels good that they didn't try to wrap every single thing perfectly with a bow, and it felt like a realistic story. It didn't feel like if it was all too perfectly placed, because I feel like if it was so parallel and perfectly placed, by the end we would have been like, oh, this is a dud. But then when you realize that like it intersects at some point and it just is like winding, and you go, oh my gosh, that's crazy. It makes their characters more complex, and therefore there was a reason why there wasn't more information added, and I like that. I like the banter between Alice and Hayden. I like that is like tension. And when we first meet them and have their interactions, it's almost like if he doesn't care about her, he's not really that interested. I know people can make the assumption maybe that it was like that he was threatened by her a little bit, but I think honestly, it feels like if he wasn't that threatened by her, that he was more so thinking about the work. It wasn't about, oh my goodness, this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, which I feel like is so stereotypical of stories, where you always feel like if the story is as soon as I see her, I knew it was you were the one. And I was just like, this didn't feel like that time and place for this. And I'm glad it wasn't like this. You felt like if he was a little grumpy man, just like living his life, trying to be not the black sheep, trying to prove himself to the world, and he got offered this job but didn't get offered this job, and he's like, what the heck is going on? So him just trying to figure it out. It wasn't really about Alice at first, but then you see his walls defrost, And I love that we see his walls defrost because we also see Margaret's walls defrost. Alice is like literally that ray of sunshine that stops them from being so icy, that helps them to see the world and be a part of the world. And it felt good to see that happen. It felt like if it was healing both of them to watch that happen. So I saw something on TikTok about like insta love, and I was like, I don't really think that this is an insta love story. I'm not really sure what that meant, but I do feel like every second that we had interaction between Hayden and Alice, there was like respect and there was like a true building of love. It was a true building of I respect you, I see you, and I want to keep talking to you. I want to experience life with you and feel authentic with you instead of this is all just only tension. Like I think it took until chapter 11 for them to even kiss. Spoiler, sorry. Takes them till chapter 11 to really kiss. And after that, it's hot and heavy without sex. Also, spoiler, but it's hot and heavy. But you get that tension of like, I want more, I want more, I want more, I want more, without feeling like, oh, this is all that they have. They have nothing else in common. Because they do have a lot in common. I feel like it's opposites but also similarities. So Hayden is feeling like if he's the black sheep. Alice always felt like if she was the black sheep. That's a common thing that they have. They're not just that they're writers, but feeling like if they have constantly have to prove themselves, even if they are given awards, even if they are shown things. And I feel like that's very relatable to read into. Like you don't celebrate wins as often, and sometimes it's great to see like somebody else is also struggling with that, and they could bond in that their parents aren't really there. They're there but they're not really there, and feeling that iced outness was something that they could relate to. I liked that about this story. Yes, there could have been deeper things that they're more relatable with, but as we talk, as they share, like not every single detail of them needs to be on the paper to be like, this is why they're compatible. But I disagreed with the insta love thing that people were talking about. I don't even really know what that means, but I was like, no, it doesn't feel like an insta love thing. And when Hayden reveals that Margaret is the one that tracked him down, and he was like, what the heck? It felt as though that he was falling in love, and what was happening, like even though like you think you know what's happening, but you don't actually know what's happening, and it felt like a whirlwind for him. So you could see him shifting. So you were still getting depth of a character without necessarily getting depth of a character. That made sense. If you were looking for the depth, you were getting the depth. Okay. This is the part where I'm gonna start to, spoil things. Let's rewind a little bit to Gerald and Nina and why they broke up. And me saying, if you know, you know. Because Gerald and Nina had a secret baby, Nicolette. Then we realize that Ruth, who he was raising as his niece, was really his child, his secret love child with Nina. And Nina and Gerald didn't really break up because Nina fell in love with somebody else. They didn't want the scandal. They didn't want the world to know that Ruth was really his child. So he raised her as his niece, but like lovingly, like if it was his own, because it was his own. And then you're like, okay, this is this the string is unraveling here, guys. Okay, so we know that Gerald's secret baby is called Nicolette. what does this mean about anything? And we're putting pieces together because Hayden tells Alice that his mom's name is Nicolette. And we're backtracking and we're like, but why does that sound so familiar? Suspiciously, it's why Margaret was talking about, oh, there was the Aldridge that her great grandfather Lawrence had that got renamed by Gerald, called the Nicolette. Then it got renamed to the Ebner. Alice was like, why do you lie about the name of the book, name of the hotel, if you said you haven't been there since it was called the Aldridge or whatever? Like, why'd you call it the Ebner when really, or why'd you call it the Nicolette when it's really called the Ebner if you said, like, what's going on? Huh? So then it's because Margaret had a secret baby with Cosmo St. Clair that she named Nicolette, and that is why Nicolette is the first thing that she called the hotel instead of the Ebner or instead of the Aldridge, Arledge or Aldridge or whatever, because she can remember Nicolette because she named her child Nicolette, who's Hayden's mother, meaning that Hayden is her grandson. And that is why when Hayden said, oh, she reached out to me, I didn't reach out to her, it was because she was trying to find her grandson. She was trying to get to know her grandson, which means that she was betraying Alice this entire time. She was just lying to Alice this whole time to be like, oh, there's a competition for you guys to like see who can get the book. And it was like, you diabolical bitch. How could you do this? You know that this girl was invested. And then when she said, oh, I tried to make a quick decision, but I thought about what Alice said, and it only works with someone I completely trust. She said that at the beginning when after their initial interviews, and I'm like, look at you lying. Look at you. How you could do that? Crazy work. So then when she's in page 122, which is like kind of like 30-40%, near 50%, she's just like, you can trust me. And then Margaret responds, you can trust me. No, she can't, because you've been lying this whole time. Diabolical. Diabolical. It made me so bad that we figured out after with this whole plot twist that Nicolette is Margaret's secret baby. And I understand all of it, which is me now getting into why I think this book is 5 stars. Because if we look at all the information and why it was so important, we can look at Margaret Grace Ives going from start to beginning to show her father, her grandfather, her great grandfather, show like their individual stories, not just as individual stories, but a way to show how they made decisions and why they made decisions. To show the greed, to show the stress, to show the struggle, to show the black sheepness. It shows the pattern of who the Ives are. It shows how they feel, how they think, how they operate, how they treat people. It The innate feeling of I always have to prove myself that shows up in Hayden, the feeling like the black sheep, which he didn't escape, even though he didn't know that that's what his family was. He didn't know that that was a part of him. He still felt us isolated, even though he wasn't rich like how his family is. And it was just like this entire buildup is interconnected. It's how Margaret keeps she keeps emphasizing it. Alice keeps trying to separate the characters, and TikTok tries to separate the characters, and be like, why did we start all the way from the beginning? But it's just pattern. And in my opinion, being so detailed about these side characters is only to deflect from the truth of it all, so that she doesn't fully show Alice the truth, so that she doesn't figure out that she has a secret baby. But honestly, if you literally start to dig, like how Alice is digging, she could jeopardize these secrets that Margaret wants to keep secret. But I also feel like if with all of this uncovering and challenging and meeting Hayden and all the emotions that were coming up from Margaret, I don't even know if she wants to keep it a secret anymore. I think she does, but there's a difference between why you're listening to a story in your head, like just memories of something that you replay over and over, versus telling somebody that story and somebody having a response. So you're telling them the story, they respond, they ask you questions, and they're challenging you. It's completely different from when you build a story in your mind, or like a story is replaying in your mind and there's no challenge to it. So you get the living the lie, living closed off when you relive the story in your mind. And then what happens when the lies and the secrets get so hard to, like, what happens when, and what usually happens when you tell lies and when you have to keep a story straight is like when somebody starts to challenge you, it all starts to unravel because this is decades of story that you're trying to tell, Miss Margaret. So by the time she gets to her generation and sharing about Laura and the cult and the hearing about the cult, like the hearing as in like the judge trial and Margaret and Cosmo's relationship, and then it becomes about pain and agony. It's no longer a story. It's no longer just the patterns by that point. So we've already talked about the story from her head, like the haunting of why she thinks her family is the curse. So that's why it needed to be told up till that point. So that when we finally get to her story with Cosmo and her sister, we understand the level of pain. We understand the level of agony. We understand their decision making from the pattern that they've made so that we can then go, okay, this is why they are the way that they are. And this is why they're making decisions that they're making right now. They're trying to escape themselves. So Lara was trying to escape just her family because she was so terrified. Like her family was just scary. Being in her family was anxiety because of all the paparazzi and all the media, and it was just a shit show. That Lara was just terrified that she just wanted to escape, and then somebody preyed on her and took her into a cult and made her stop speaking to her family and extorted her for money, so that by the point that they realized she was so deep into it that these people, like, she literally had to get, like, Margaret found her and, well, no, Lara reached out to extort them for more money, and Margaret went and was like, just tell me a time and place and I could get you out of it. And Lara was so wounded that she just went to Switzerland, and she, with the doctor Cecil, who, this is why Cecil was at the beginning of the story and why Cecil has been in the story, because that's who Lara fell in love with, and then she got sick and died. But they had a baby named Jodie, who's the person that keeps opening the door and who has kept Margaret, I guess, a part of the world. Essentially, Jodie lives with her or is taking care of her. That part, we were kind of like, it answers the question, but it doesn't fully answer the question. And then, like, does Cecil know that Margaret is there? I assume so. So like, there are assumptions being made by the end of the story that maybe could have been wrapped up a little bit better, or maybe I wasn't paying attention. Don't know. But by the time it gets to their stories, Margaret and Laura's stories, it shows you this is why I gave up Nicolette. So it was supposed to be like an explanation to Nicolette of like, this is why I gave you up. An explanation to Hayden to be like, this is why your life is the way that it is. That it wasn't just celebrity gossip. I'm not a horrible person. It was to humanize them. It wasn't just outbursts. It wasn't just It was protecting people from life or death situations because Cosmo literally died in a car accident because the paparazzi was chasing them, and she vowed to like protect the baby that she had in her stomach at that time. She tried to run and hide after he died, and they just kept finding her. And she had to like shut herself up in a house for 2 years, just like what Nina did for Gerald, and pretended like if she was just sick, and then she just disappeared after she gave the baby up for it. Well, during while she was giving the baby up for adoption. Like that pattern to show that's where she got that from. She got that from Gerald. That's where all of those things tie into each other. Like the entire story does in fact tie into each other. If you read it and you see that it wasn't just this one person or this one thing, and you can't tell that story without understanding why that person did whatever they did. So it makes sense why Emily was so detailed about certain things, and then these side characters, people like Francine or Rosalind or whatever, they're just like a little explanation, a little tidbit to like give the character's body, but not really like fully get into their story. So like, do I think like Margaret handled it the right way? Honestly, no. But it felt like if it was like a string that just that you start to pull and pull and pull and pull, and it just unraveled everything. And that I don't think that was ever Margaret's intention to fully unravel everything, at least not with Alice, because clearly she was just using Alice, which pissed me off. But that was like a means to an end for her, and I was just like, you don't really need to use Alice to means to an end. You could have just grow balls and just tell Hayden. Like, if you wanted to reach out to Hayden, because I think Laura, before she died, said you need to reach out to them and tell them what happened. Then grow the balls and do it. Don't use the poor girl. Like that was just real mess up. Like she didn't have to do that. Like I think that also shows thematically like there's no telling partial truths. Like you tell the truth, and like all of it is gonna come out regardless of if you keep trying to like make it all wrapped up. Like Alice is literally there, Hayden is there, they're journalists. Cecil literally runs a restaurant that is super popular. He's Jodie's father. He's Laura's husband, who's your sister. Yeah, Laura's not there anymore, but like connections can be made. Hayden found the picture of Cecil to begin with. So, and that's kind of what stopped him from pursuing, because when he pursued the picture of Cecil and showed it to Margaret, she shut down. I was just like basically like that she wasn't going to tell him who it was because she had decided that she wasn't going to trust Hayden, even though Alice had been saying you need to trust Hayden because you brought him here, you're asking him all sorts of questions about himself when he's supposed to be interviewing you. He thinks he's doing a job and you're just lying to him. Of course, if I'm falling in love with the girl, I don't care about the story anymore. I'm going to give it up because I don't have any sort of investment into this. The person just lying to me. They sought me out. They're putting me on some sort of test, and I've fallen in love. I'd rather just move to Atlanta, just not deal with this and just be in love with the love of my life instead of jumping through your hoops. Who wouldn't do that? Like, be so for real, Margaret. Who wouldn't do that? You lied to him the entire time. Like, he was literally there putting together pieces, and then you're going to be like, oh no, he wants nothing to do with me. Well, that's your fault. It's low key your fault. And then you continue to string Alice along, and then you were like, well, I might as well write the book. No. You're a weirdo. Margaret's a weirdo. It's like, okay, you don't have to do all of this. Like, Margaret's, why did you do all of this? That part of this book, I was just like, you're crazy. Margaret, you're actually crazy. But I loved the juice. Like, me, I was just like a nosy person. When I look at it and the understanding of the book, I'm like, but I wanted the celebrity gossip. I didn't really care about Margaret's personality. She pissed me off at the end, but I was like, You telling me that I got scandals? There's cheating. There's a cult. There's a hearing. There's an accident. All of this. I was like, give me all the tea. Yes, please. Give me all the tea. I also understand why people would feel as though they don't like the story, because it feels like if you have to dig deep to get the full picture, to see the patterns, to see the themes, that you have to read it and understand that there's dynamic to the book. It's not just as simple as or two-dimensional. It is movie like. It is rounded characters, and the story has a circle up to it for you to understand what is going on in it. And that's not an easy read. That's something that you have to look at and go, I have to be a little bit analytical by the time I get to the end to understand it. Which, if you're going into it for an easy read, can really piss you off, because you're just like, I didn't want, like, what is happening? Why did all of this happen? And it did catch me off guard. The twisting of it caught me off guard, and I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that coming. But I also wasn't trying to figure it out. I think maybe if people were trying to figure it out, they also would have felt like, if, okay, maybe this is just too much. But yeah, I stand by what I said. I said what I said. I still think this book was 5 stars. I think that the book was, it was good. I enjoyed it. It had me in a chokehold. It had like me feeling goosebumps. So when it was like mysterious, I don't like scary things really, but it made me feel like if I was back in like the 60s in some parts of it. It made me feel scary. Like this book goes from like the 20s, the 30s. It goes through all these eras, and you're like wrapped up in it. And I loved that. I would love to see this book as a movie. Truly, I would love to see this book as a movie. I loved it so much. So, thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys.